figure out how to use three hands. Firstly, it's a great honour to be invited to speak here on two bases, sharing a platform with people that have really been super achievers in their careers. Another reason why it's an honour is actually to stop and reminisce. We're not very often forced to reminisce about those times, and it brought about quite a thought-provoking introspection. And I suppose that's maybe where I should start. I followed a typical profile at that stage anyway, for boys that came to this school, immigrant parents, Catholic generally, and my folks arrived in this country with a cardboard suitcase in 1956, and they were paid immigrants in those days to go to this country. They paid £12 each, and my father, whom I'm very, very proud, had two jobs in his life to send my brother to the school. He worked until the age of 82, he still alive. He stopped in January instead of working. That's not because he had to work, but because he loved working eventually. You start to enjoy working like that. But it was part of an analog to digital age, and so he was the person who carried expertise across those two genres. So it's something I'm very, very proud of. But if you go right back to when we started, that's my Form 1 photograph. I was at the school at probably some of the most interesting times. It was the time of the Vietnam War, it was the time of protest music, it was the time of Woodstock. A lot of people don't even remember Woodstock. It was the time of the Cold War, and it was the time of the Beatles. Talked to my daughter, she actually has to really drum up some distant memory and to actually figure out what the Beatles actually were. The school was one building. In fact, I walked through the school yesterday where Mr. Wilson's office was actually in the school. That was just the toilet block and the tuck shop. That's all that building was. And the main school, this side where the music room is, was a little concrete quad where we used to pay one bounce. And there was an open canopy going to the hall. In fact, that wall is the wall of the hall that no longer exists when the hall was expanded. So it was one building with a staff room and a chemistry block underneath, and 5 classrooms at the top. We graduated, we started literally on the south side of the building, and we finished on the north side of the building, and we left the school. So when you look at that photograph, it's not important about whether you recognize other people. So I'm sorry, your photograph's not on there. My best mate, Mr. Terry McKinnon, whose brother's here at the moment, and he's no longer in this country. There's 35 boys that started there, and regrettably only 21 of us finished, but that was the total school. It was 100 boys.
Which one is you?
I added some on there.
Which one is you?
My wife didn't even recognise So it was a fantastic time. It was probably the best time in my life, and I think the comment was mentioned not at the time, but certainly now when you look back at it. There were two boys there, Montgomery and Van Beek. They were unfortunately boys that had to repeat Form 1, and I got involved with Montgomery and Van Beek on the first week of school. And so that was probably one of my claims to fame, is that I was beaten in the first week by Brother Mountford. Obviously I got into some talking session when I should have been doing other things other than talking. I was a very, very average student, and I remember lots of those people there. And somebody asked me this morning, Buster Callaghan and Neil Morrison, they were people that had bright quips all the time. They were great sportsmen like Michael McLennan and John Ciara, great students. I saw on the honours board there, Kevin Perry came number 1, came top in our class in Matric. There was only 21 of us in Matric. And Monty Hosing. So in actual fact, it was at that stage not the black students, it was the Chinese students who were regarded as black students who were the minority. There were 4 or 5 men in the class. And popular boys, Peter Devine, There was even two boys in the photograph there, and I won't point them out. They were, as far as we were concerned, they were expelled for cheating. Maybe they just didn't make the grade. But Patrick Pack actually was rumoured to have left his crib notes in the exam paper when he actually had Here's old Patrick there. The person that he gave his crib notes to was Rory Helps there. Both expelled. Now, I'm not sure if they were expelled or not, that's not the point. The point is, it was a great rumour and it was a great thing to remember. And about 15 years later, I met him and he became a helicopter pilot. I mean, a genuine helicopter pilot. So it didn't really have a lot of reflection. And then there was a very small chap, right at the back of the class there, Peter Jackson. He was short, he always remained short, when we were Matric, he was still short. And he had very, very thick glasses. And he was into hypnotism. And you must understand, Matric boys, that was a 9 going into Matric. You had to find anything you could possibly find to pass the time. Schoolwork was the last thing on the agenda. So Peter got into hypnotism, and he actually managed to work out a way that he could, whether the chaps pretended to or not, that he could actually pre-hypnotize the class. So what he would do is he'd wait for one of the priests to actually start the lesson, and then he'd snap his fingers at half the boys in the class. And he'd snap his fingers in and they'd wake up. Now that's true, it's genuinely true. As I said, I don't know whether the boys were pretending or whether hypnotism was a real thing, but that's actually occupied us for at least 2 or 3 months in the school. They were also great teachers. It's true, it's about connecting the dots and the teachers. We still had priests teaching us at that stage, and that was a privilege, and we made up stories about the priests. And again, whether they were true or not was actually not the point. Father Dicky had one lung and he was half blind. And he used to come into, he was one of these people that believed that it was spare the rod and spoil the child. So he would walk into the class and he would actually swing left and right, letting the boys, because clearly they needed a beating because they'd done something wrong that day. And we would actually all hide behind the desk seeing if we could make him break his cane on the desk as he ran past Sunday. And it was all part of the fun. There's a young chap, it's not so young anymore, all these chaps are young. There's a chap that you know here, Michael Fassio. Father O'Brien used to teach us, I can't remember what subject he taught us, but Father O'Brien had this habit of spluttering as he was talking. Michael Fassio sat in the front seat with his raincoat on. Father O'Brien didn't notice a thing. And then he'd turn around. Can't pretend, can't notice that the boys are distracted in class. What you got the raincoat on? Sit right in the front. You can't wipe it. I remember Brother Batilovich teaching us about Jethro Tull Aquilone. That song was never the same. I said every single word in that song. Or the tower we called Brutus, because apparently if you got beaten by him, you really know about it. And Father Dalton, who was actually quite an enigma. And you know, I was probably the most surprised person out of every one of those boys to be picked head boy. It was a privilege, and I certainly believe that there were a whole lot of other candidates that were probably much more qualified than I was. One last memory I'd like to share with you before I go on and tell you what I've done since then, is that the school always had a problem, probably still does have a problem, with how to control the boys on the last day of school. and I think the boys try and figure out something that is much more outrageous than the previous boys so that they can leave a mark on the school. So Father Dalton, who was the principal that year, said to us, listen, if you guys get out of hand, I'm going to beat you. And we decided that we weren't going to get out of hand, but we buy presents for each of the teachers. We were a bit wussy. And we decided that one of the teachers, Mrs. Haley, was taking a swimming class up at the pool, which was invisible at that stage. And so we went and we came back not even 2 minutes after the end of the second break. And he was standing there with his cane, flexing. I told you, you're not going to get carried away. So my claim to fame at the school was being beaten in the first week and being beaten on the last week. And you know, I was never more than an average student. I'm always quite surprised at people that are asked, well, what did you get in Matric? It's very different in my day to what it is today. But I remember very, very clearly what the symbols are in Matric. I've got a C, 4 Ds, 2 E's. Now, it doesn't mean a hell of a lot, but the symbol's pretty much the same, I think, when you talk about it. It's an achiever of note. And that's probably one thing I learned at the school here, and I'll share that with you. I've now got 3 qualifications, one I've got from what is now UJ, and I've got a qualification from WITS, and a degree from UCT. So actually, I think it was all part of growing up, finding direction, and finding people that actually gave you some direction. I've had the good fortune to be involved, though, with 2 companies that have probably made the biggest and will have the longest legacy in Johannesburg, and I'd like to share that with you. I was the last CEO of a company that was listed in 1968 on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange called Barlow Rand Properties. They took all of those, this is one of the last ones, some of you might have spent time in the back of the cars. That's the old top star dump. What we don't realise, and it's 2 things I want to sort of almost shock you with and then explain. Did you know that all of the gold that was mined in South Africa was mined together with uranium-236? The second one is, did you know that a few kilometers north of here still is manufactured 380,000 tons of explosives and over 100 million detonators that fuel the African mining industry? Almost 60% market share of that. And I'll go on to explain it, because the question I would ask you is, does it matter? And do you care? And is it important? And I'll explain it. So I come back to the uranium-236. Those miners were very clever in those days. Starting in 1896, guys dug a hole inside, threw the sand over their shoulders, because the prevailing wind was from the northeast, and of course you didn't want to spend all of the time with dust blowing into your face, so they created a row of dumps south of Main Reef Road. And as I said, uranium-236, first half-life is radon, second half-life starts getting towards things like thorium, lead, mercury, all of those horrible things that you read all about acid mine drainage. The company that I was with came up with a plan, this is back to part of that, when they mined gold at 10 grams per ton, had 70% efficiency, those dumps still had 3 grams per ton of gold in it. So the choice was, go down 3 kilometers below ground to go and get 3 grams of gold per ton, or actually take it out of the dumps. The company I was with took those dumps, reprocessed them, and actually put them into better dumps, which were covered on top and grassed on top. And they removed all of the dumps through, and continued along the reef, but through from Crown Mines in the west through to Kelvin in the east. That's one of the last dumps that are being removed now, and progressively they have since 1990 removed all of those dumps. They didn't just remove those dumps. That's typically one of the ones that's still left there. What they did is they created new development. So they created new development, and that's what Barlow Rand Properties was about. They took all of those old buildings, they took all of the old artifacts out of the buildings, they took the plans of all of the old buildings, and that was the creation of Gold Reef City. And yes, today you view it as a theme park, but that's what its history is. We took those old Grove City. We actually moved it 2 kilometers. One day the National Heritage Committee will find out as we moved 2 kilometers, but it's still standing, but not in the same place. So that's part of what we did. We actually shoveling underlying ground at Gold Reef City and created the opportunity for Gold Reef City Casino to be built. And the Apartheid Museum was part of that, on the basis that you could build a casino, but you had to actually create something which was a legacy in Johannesburg. And so, even though it's a time of our history that we're not necessarily proud of, that was the museum that was actually created on a land that in fact went through what we call a brownfields development. It was used for mining and it was redeveloped, and then it became something which is a landmark into the future and is a legacy that survives. And they have regular art exhibitions there along that theme as well, and this is just one of the recent art exhibitions. After that, I had the opportunity to move on to another company. This comes back to the explosives. I know your mother worked there for many, many years with you. I have the good fortune to now be in a company. When gold was first discovered, they decided that they didn't like the Brits to actually produce the explosives for the gold mining industry, so he wanted to build a new factory in Modderfontein, and he did that with a patent from Alfred Nobel, and they built a explosive factory in Modderfontein. Modderfontein was established in 1896, and the basis for explosives was nitroglycerin. And because nitroglycerin is the stuff that you see in movies, that yellowish green type liquid that goes boom when you just look at it, will vibrate or stand area, it needed huge portions of land. And it was an area that was totally excluded from development for over 100 years, from 1896 onwards, and that whole area was just cordoned off. And approximately 1990, they decided that they would move the manufacture of explosives from nitroglycerin base to ammonium nitrate base, which is effectively just fertilizer. So that liberated close to half of the land that was utilized for explosives, and that land has become available for development. But it gives another opportunity. It's not just development, it's also preserving heritage. So this actually is a building that was built in 1896. Our office is actually down here. And it was a building that was built in 1896. It's called Casino House. It was the recreation club. So Tim, you were asking the question. If you come up past the dam, you go to the sports club, that's the recreation club, and that's now the offices for the company that does the development. Part of the development is also about preserving the heritage. This was the original factory manager's house. So we have heritage buildings, we pulled out certain buildings, but we have a study that's shown us what heritage we've got to preserve. We've actually started a heritage committee that actually does walks, that take people through these buildings to share some of the history that's there. We've got photographs from 1896 that we've used as wallpaper in our offices. We've still got Model T Fords standing in the car park of that building. So we've gone on to develop those areas. I just want to show you the extent of the area that is totally kept out of the urban environment. Again, that's the N3 coming down here. This is Modderfontein Road frame. This is London Road frame. That's the Allendale Road. This is 8 kilometers north to south. And that's only half of the area. This is all still part of the factory which continues to go on there. That's 8 kilometers from there to there. This over here is Longmeadow, which has been one of the developments we've done over the past 10 years. This is the whole Greenstone area, over 4,000 new houses. So it was one thing, became another thing. It was part of our history, and now it's actually going to go on to be part of our future. So areas like
Longmeadow Business Park, Greenstone, those are from what was felt before have actually become new developments. And that was until March this year. It was actually part of ACI, part of ACI's heritage. And now, as of 20th of March this year, it's been sold to the Chinese. I still continue as the CEO of that with a vision for developing this land. It's got a station on the car train line. This is in fact what our vision is, of what we'd like to build over the station. There's 275 hectares of parkland being set aside there. Over 1,000 people a weekend go through, mountain bike there, and actually go take walks through there, go do park runs through Sporthouse as a park run franchise there. That's our vision of what's actually going to be created here in the future. All in all, will be over 500 hectares of open space area in the development. This is Zimbro Business Estate. This is a 3,000 unit residential estate overlooking the dams, which have actually all cleaned up. Those dams were originally part of the water system for the factory because it needed water there. So you can see here the reserve area where we do the mountain biking. And so that's part of a future development there. This is just a photograph of what was a prize cattle stud at one stage, and an open piece of felt is now Greenstone Mall, and the 3,000 odd houses that will be there in the future. The Chinese have a different dream. And I'm always asked the question, so is that what you're going to build? When people put pictures, or create pictures, they create a picture that's in their head of what the future is going to be. And no, that's not necessarily what we're going to do. But I think that the future survival of Johannesburg as a city, when you hear the statistics that say we'll be a city of over 20 million people by the year 2030, and that's unfortunately Africa will have 2 out of every 5 people under the age of 16 living in it, and then we've got to come up with a different model, and certainly that model's got to be sustainable related to how we use our infrastructure. So no, that's not the model, but certainly it will be a much denser model than what we're used to. That's a photograph of higher density development that is certainly not unacceptable. Where the Chinese come from, our shareholders, they come from Shanghai, which has been the economic miracle of China over the past 20 years, and has developed, and that's what the chairman actually says it's going to be something like the Manhattan of Africa, which I'm quite sceptical of, but certainly development in that area will happen. I believe that it will probably be close to that type of thing. There were skyscrapers, certainly not that. But if you look at that, I see it should actually be more of a Star Wars type of. So that's what I do, it's where I've come from. And what did St. Benedict actually teach me in all of that? Well, be a good implementer, stand up for what is right, always deal with transparency, treat all people with respect, build lasting relationships, and finally, a love of learning. And I suppose I'd like to end on that, because the love of learning is actually what got me to where I've got, from being C, 4 Ds and 2 Ds. And that's best summed up by a quote from Confucius, and that says that love of goodness without love of learning degenerates into silliness, love of wisdom without love of learning degenerates into utter lack of principle, love of keeping promises without love of learning degenerates into villainy, love of uprightness without love of learning degenerates into harshness, and love of courage without love of learning degenerates into turbulence. So the most important thing is that really you've got to continue being willing to expose yourself to new ideas and continue to always want to learn different ways of doing things.